Okay, and another thing, I had brought some books with me and people bought them, and I will be very happy to sign them before you leave. So, just catch me when it's all over and say, hey, sign this, no problem. Okay, good. Now, my talk, the interplay of Hong Kong, Scotland, and the Sunflowers with Taiwan's embattled democracy. A lot of things have been happening. Democracy is clearly in the air. And I'm happy to be here. I seem to bring out some of my best stuff when I'm in LA. I remember I spoke to this group in 2010, and someone in the audience asked me the question, what do you think about Confucius Institutes? I don't know if anyone even remembers that, but I said, beware of them. They are like a Trojan horse. They are propaganda. And in a way, finally, sometimes I feel like I'm giving Cassandra-like prophecies, because finally some of the universities in the United States are catching on. Chicago University just canceled their contract with the Confucius Institute. They said, the University of Pennsylvania, I think it was Penn State, canceled theirs. The Toronto School Board canceled theirs. And many others are canceling. I don't know if San Diego had one or not, and if they have canceled. But many others are beginning to see that you cannot have academic freedom and have a Confucius Institute. They don't mix. As I say, I come out with some of my best stuff here. Now, I'm also I brought this book up here. Actually, this is the last book that I have with me. It's a $5 book, but I wanted to use it to kind of show you. This book came out in 2008. And in this book, it came out in February, just before the election in 2008. Now, in this book, there is a chapter that says, don't elect Buying Joe. Do people listen to me? No. But they are, when Ma's popularity went down to 9%, all of a sudden, it began to dawn on them again. I tell you, I sometimes make Cassandra-like prophecies. It's coming through again. I've got some good zingers for you tonight, so they will come up later on in the program. But if anyone wants this book also at the end, I'll be glad to provide it. Okay, so let's get down to business. Title. So, let's first get square on what we mean by democracy. In a democracy, the common people are considered as the primary source of political power. Common people are you and me. We have majority rule, but we have minority recognition. Now, it doesn't mean if the majority wins, the rest of you poor guys, that's the end. No, you get recognized and get your rights. There are the principles of social equality and respect for the individual within a community. It is basically, and of course you've all heard this from Lincoln, and echoed in a way by Sun Yat-sen, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now, I bring all this out because when I start talking about Hong Kong and Scotland and Taiwan, remember these points. Okay. Taiwan if there are any new people here, sometimes there are new guests, Taiwan has had a hard-won democracy. It didn't get, World War II ended in 1945. Many of you weren't around at that time. I was. I was just a little kid, but I was around. 1945. 1987, July 15, martial law is lifted in Taiwan. Do you realize, how far that's... now, martial law technically did not go into effect until 1949, but after World War II, it's basically, what, 42 years that Taiwan had suffered under the military of Chiang Kai-shek and his son. Martial law is finally lifted in 87. I came there in 88, so they probably knew I was coming. In 1992, okay, now martial law is lifted, but 92 is the first time the members of the Legislative Yuan were elected democratically by the populace. Imagine that. Now, I'm going to mention a point. Who were the losers in World War II? We had Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany had a voting democracy 10 years after the war. Taiwan, 45 years. And supposedly Chiang Kai-shek was one of the good guys, right? Japan, the other, militaristic country, had their democracy working again 10 years after the war. Taiwan, we're still waiting. The 1992, the garrison command was disbanded and people started to talk freely. Now, if you were there when the garrison command, they wore these silver helmets and everything, walked the street, bum, 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 bum. They were almost like secret police. They could arrest you without trial for anything. So this is 92. 96 is the first time Taiwan's president is elected by the populace. So keep this in mind. It's a hard-won democracy. And many of you suffered through it. Many of you came, and probably some of you were blacklisted during that time. You couldn't go back. Okay, so I had the word embattled democracy. Definition of that. Embattled means you are beset with attackers, criticism, or controversy. And we're going to talk about some of the attackers of Taiwan's democracy. Because both democracy and Taiwan's democracy find themselves still embattled in today's world. Okay, now, I hope there are not too many Republicans in the audience. I just wanted to know that I have been endorsed by the President of the United States. That was actually, the picture was taken at AIT, was American Institute in Taiwan, was celebrating the 4th of July, and they had a Obama cutout there, so I had my picture taken. Okay. Now, when Ted contacted me to speak here, I was very deep in research. So I told Ted, oh, I'd be glad to speak, And of course, I got together my top team of researchers. That's me on the left, and my V is for Vendetta mask. Okay. And the rest are some friends. This is actually a picture taken at the British Chamber. There's a group of us that are kind of crazy. We always dress up for those things. But that's another story. Anyway, I accepted my mission from Tibet. I would seek out the good, the bad, and the ugly. Of course, everyone in this room is on the good guy's side, but we'll talk about the bad guys. Okay, so threats to Taiwan's democracy from without. The greatest threat, no doubt in my mind, is China. But there are others as well. From without, even within the United States and around the world, there are those whose focus is on short-term economic gain, and they don't want the economic boat rocked. And if China has a problem with Taiwan, then they say, oh, we got to solve that problem. Why don't we just give Taiwan to China and everyone will be economically happy? Not so. From within, there are also problems. Taiwan still has a divided sense of identity. It is, I'll have some things later to show you, it is developing. But this is still in process, and just this last was July, Hao Pei-sun spoke, and he said, Taiwan's future has to be decided by all the Chinese. And you kind of, what the, you know, it was big WTF. Now, when I say WTF, some people may have one understanding of that. But I was talking with good friend Jerry Liu in the back, and you know, he said, whenever you say, what? You say, what you're really saying, WTF is, what's that, friend? But you know, here you have China's got 1.3 billion people. And we've got 23 million in Taiwan. Let's have a vote. Can we outvote them? No way. Taiwan, and we'll see with the other places, its democracy has to be decided by the voting Taiwanese. There you go. Also, of course, there are quislings, profiteers, and more within Taiwan that try to undermine its democracy. Anyone here know who is the White Wolf? Yeah. I was at a talk given by the White Wolf just about a month ago. And the White Wolf is, you know, of course, a known gangster. He was responsible with the Bamboo Union for the killing of Henry Liu in California. He did 10 years time in prison in the U.S. for drug dealing, not on the murder charge. But he is now back in Taiwan. He had gone to China, and then he basically rode out the statute of limitations. He is back in Taiwan, and he says, I am for unification. Here you have this gangster, White Wolf. Now, he's kind of, in my mind, like a mafia person trying to go legitimate. And he's basically, to me, going for the highest bidder. In my mind, the money, more money backing the unification people than the democracy people. China's got billions of dollars. But he has said, I am with anyone who is for unification. You know, clear as anything where he stands. There you go. Okay, now here is what do the people want. I'm going to, this is a survey done by, it covers from 1994 up to the year 2010, okay? And I'm going to kind of have to show you how the process of Taiwan's identity is changing, okay? The pointer or not? Yes. Oh, good, okay. Okay, good. Whoop, going fast one. Let me go back a minute. Okay, Now if we start at that top line there, okay, this started out at 38%. This line is those who want to maintain the status quo and decide sometime in the future. You know, they just support, let's keep the status quo. So that one went down and then came back up, and it is over there at 36% of the people want the status quo, you know, on independence or unification. Let's decide later. Now, of course, you have to remember, couched in all this is the fact that China has said, if you say independence, we will attack. Now, again on this word, when I spoke here years ago, and some will remember this, I said you have to stress the D word and not the I word. Not that I don't believe in independence or anything, but because of the people that are afraid of rocking the boat. If you say democracy, every American knows what democracy is. If you say Taiwan independence, Americans say, oh, well, China threatens war, da-da-da-da-da-da. So, the status quo in one way, we have de facto democracy. Now, this is a long thing, but we have to emphasize the I word, independence, is like a flash word. It gets people upset. Democracy, people have no trouble with. Because the I word gets you into another kettle of fish. Okay, anyway, so that's the majority people say status quo, de facto independence. Let's leave it at that. Okay, this next one here, this is maintain the status quo indefinitely. And let's just keep it the way it is for the rest of the life. Which is interesting. These two together, you know, give us about 63% of the people in Taiwan by the year of 2010. This is 2010 over here. This is 1994. So still, the majority of the people say, okay, you know, we're independent, de facto, let's not press it. Okay, next line. This is the most interesting one here. This is those who had no opinion. They didn't want to say. But you have to remember, 1994, the garrison command, the secret police had just disbanded. People were still afraid to really say what they thought because they remembered what happened in the old days. So that number, though, has dropped here. So it was 15%, and it has dropped down to 6%. Let me grab my water here. You know what that means? That one right there. Yep. You know, people are now, only 6% are afraid to say what they think. It has dropped from 15%. That's good in my mind. That's a sign of a democracy. People are not afraid to say their mind. Okay, some other interesting things. We have then the next group here. This one here. They want eventual independence. You know, maintain status quo, move towards independence. And they end up now, they have 9% of those. 9%, that one there. Then we have those who, those who want unification as soon as possible. They went there from 4%, they are down now to about 1.5. You know, this is people speaking freely. Only 1.5 are for unification as soon as possible.
That's good.
That's a good sign. Okay, we have those who want independence as soon as possible. And they started out at 5 and they have moved up to 6 here. So we've got two groups. These are those that want eventual independence, these that want as soon as possible, like tomorrow. That total makes around 15%. This other one here are those who want eventual unification, that is about 9%. So those that, you know, we've got about 16% immediately independent or eventual, and about 10% unification or not. But the rest are in that mixture. Okay, so these are, you know, key points. The no response dropped from 20.5 to 6.1. Highest ratings were status quo. Independence later, 16.1, and immediate 6.22. Okay. Here's another survey. This is good. This is a later, because that one ended in 2010. 2013, 57% of the people saw themselves as Taiwanese, flat, just Taiwanese. 36% saw themselves as joint Taiwanese and Chinese. And I would look on that like, say, I'm an American. My grandfather came from Ireland. I see myself as an Irish American. You know, I have Irish roots, but I'm an American. So someone says, you know, well, I'm Taiwanese, but I have Chinese roots. You know, somewhere in the back, they came from China. But this is the key thing here. 93% see themselves as either Taiwanese alone or Taiwanese and Chinese. The amount of people that say Chinese alone dropped from 25, this is again going back to 94, from 25% to 3.6. A good sign. More and more people are saying, hey, we're Taiwanese. We're not even part Chinese anymore. So whenever someone says, you know, this is what the Wade Wolf said, you know, we said, why are you for unification? He says, well, we are all Chinese. You know, what the WTF, right, Jerry? What's that, friend? So the identity gap is widening in Taiwan with this, and the same thing is going on in Hong Kong that we are going to get to. Okay, now another thing we've got to think of as perspective. You know, many people, when you look at a map and you see north at the top, you see Taiwan is close to China. It's easy to just from that perspective think, well, it's close, it must be part of, right? Look at the map this way. This is from one of the textbooks. And here are this is Japan here. So here, west is up here, north is over here, south and east. And you see the string of islands at Japan coming here, meets at Taiwan, and another string of islands comes up from the Philippines. Two island groups meet in Taiwan. Taiwan is a part of two island chains. Two tectonic plates meet there. That's why we got so many earthquakes. The ground is always shifting. Now, this is the continent down here. So there's the island chain, and then there's the continent. So Taiwan is part of the island chain. Why does China want Taiwan? Blue water. China wants a blue water navy. Okay? Let me go back to here a minute. For China's navy to get into the Pacific, it's got to go between Taiwan and the Philippines, Taiwan and Japan, or a long way around. If it has Taiwan, it can have submarine bases on the east coast of Taiwan. And immediately access, you know, this is the west over here where China is. So you can, hear China say, well, it's part of the motherland from time immemorial, etc., etc. The real reason is military strategy. They want to, if they are there, they can cut, if they have Taiwan here, Japan, to get over to here, has got to go all the way around. Everyone, Korea's kind of trapped in here. Those that remember World War II, there are some islands up here that Japan and Russia still fight over. They're still disputed that belong to Japan or belong to Russia. The reason Russia wanted those islands, that the only port that Russia has on the east side, Vladivostok, it's the only port that stays open through the winter. It's far enough south. And for Russian ships to get out into the Pacific, they got to have those islands rather than Japan. That's still unsettled after World War II. So you can see where these things are coming. Okay, another point of perspective. Taiwan is a mid-sized nation. It's not a little nation. It's not a little country. People think it's an island. It's not that big geographically. Population-wise, Taiwan has a population greater than 75% of the countries in the United Nations. Think of that. This is what China wants. A country that is a mid-sized nation. Do you know what that means, population-wise? What would you say if Russia, looked at the states of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark and said, we would like to have these countries? Do you consider Norway, Sweden, or Denmark small countries? No. But combined, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark have less population than Taiwan. If someone says, well, why don't we just give Taiwan to China? What, the WTF, right, Jerry? What's that, friend? It's like giving to Russia, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, and then a few more. Maybe some of the other little Baltic states or something. Why Taiwan should be important to us. If you look at almost any rating of economics or trade or anything, Taiwan is always in the top 20 of all countries. Trade export rating, 17 of 222 countries. Trade import rating, 19 of 222. Global Entrepreneurship Index, it is number 7. The Index of Economic Freedom, 17 worldwide. And so if someone says, well, why don't we just let China have Taiwan? You got to give them a big WTF, right? From the U.S., it's our 12th largest goods trading partner, both ways, import, export. And exports from the U.S. to China, Taiwan is number 16 in receiving that. It's a good country for the U.S. It's a hard-won democracy. We believe in democracy. Okay, talk about democracy a little bit. It's not perfect. Donald Rumsfeld recently said about Iraq, democracy is messy. Churchill has kind of a funny thing. The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. It's humorous, but it brings out a truth that the average voter often doesn't do that much research, unfortunately. Okay, tyranny or democracy, Louis L'Amour said, the man who does not vote has no right to complain. Remember that. Roosevelt said the safeguard of democracy is education. You know, so this is going to be part of our job, not only for ourselves, but our neighbors. And Aung San Suu Kyi of Myanmar said, you know, freedom and democracy are dreams you never give up. So let's go to Hong Kong now. Hong Kong first. In July '97, there was the handover. Hong Kong was promised at that time the right to choose its leaders in 20 years. Seems ample time to work it out. I was there. It was a very festive time. I went there in '97 just to say I was there. There are a lot of people that went there and say, you know, I was in Hong Kong in '97. It was a good time. It was a party, really. In the coming decade, if you would keep track of what's going on in Hong Kong, China tried to change their textbooks, and they complained. They would seize commodities. Look up, if you want to Google something, locust and Hong Kong. The Hong Kong people call the people from China locust. They come in and they devour everything. You know, they have good baby formula even. The people in China don't trust the baby formula that's sold in the streets there. They come to Hong Kong, load up and bring it back. They come to Hong Kong and they buy housing. They're skyrocketing. And they monopolize the hospital facilities. If a woman gives birth to a child in Hong Kong, he has a Hong Kong passport, which has a lot more freedom than the average Chinese passport. All these things are happening. The Hong Kong people are not that happy with Mother China. But then they also remember China promised you can elect your leaders in 20 years. 17 years have passed, nada, nothing, zip. Finally, China says, well, we will give you a vote on 3 choices. And the kind of the joke of the 3 choices is, the first choice is someone who likes what Beijing wants. The second choice is someone who really likes what Beijing wants. And the third choice is someone who absolutely likes what Beijing wants. Which one do you want? So, one country, 2 systems, yeah. That's what the fight is all about. It's not 2 systems, it's one country, still one system. So this is what is going on, Occupy Central, all ages, even school children who are out there. It is a week and counting still going on. They call it the umbrella revolution. Umbrella because they are using the umbrella to protect themselves against gas and pepper spray. China is using tear gas and rubber bullets. Now the key factor here is China doesn't realize that the Hong Kong people, their history is different from the people in China. You know, the Hong Kong people might not have had democracy under the UK, but they had freedom of the press, they did their own movies, they knew what democracy is. You know, they always were aware of what's going on in the outside world. And therefore, when China makes a promise, they're saying, WTF, you know, what's happening? Okay, Scotland, this is 2 friends of mine that are both Scottish. This is at St. Andrew's Ball. If you're ever in Taiwan at the end of November, best ball in town is St. Andrew's Ball. It's a Scottish ball held everywhere around the world. I bet there's several in the United States. And the nice thing about it, you do Scottish dancing. You spend about 6 weeks beforehand with free lessons on learning to do the different jigs and reels. Drinks flow, you know, it's a little bit expensive, but starts at 6 in the evening and ends at 3 or 4 in the morning. You get dinner and breakfast, and dancing in between, and everything you can drink, and everything, you know. But these are two friends. This guy, when the Scottish referendum, he wanted Scotland to be independent. This guy did not. But they're both friends. It's a democracy. They can vote. We all raise our glasses. Talk about the Scottish referendum and their sense of democracy. Now notice here, 2011, the Scottish National Party won a majority in the Scottish Parliament. They have a different parliament than the UK Parliament. Okay, two parliaments. A plank in their party platform was to have a referendum on Scottish independence. The Scots say, the party said, we're for Scotland's independence. If you want us, vote for this. Vote for us. They got the majority in the Parliament. So they brought this to David Cameron, who's the Prime Minister of the UK. And they said, this is what the people want. So they reached an agreement in 2012, 1 year later. It was made with the UK, and they would have a referendum. And they said, okay, you got 2 years to prepare for it. It had to be accomplished in 2 years, and it was. It was a very simple referendum, a yes or no vote. The question was, should Scotland be independent? Yes or no, in or out? Now for me, in one sense, I would say I had no dog in this fight. Which way Scotland went, I had a little bit of a dog in that if Scotland went independent, then all the licenses on single malt Scotch were no longer applicable to Scotland. Anyone else could start making single malt Scotch outside of the, so I was thinking, well, I do like single malt Scotch, so I was kind of, maybe they shouldn't be independent. Anyway, they voted. 55.3% said no, we don't want to be independent. 44.7% said yes. Pretty close, but definite. So, they voted. What I want you to remember, one, the vote, Democratic. Two, they arranged this in 2 years. Okay. Now, think that, back with China, 97, promised Hong Kong, not vote on independence, just elect the mayor of Hong Kong, elect the leaders. And they still couldn't do it. 17 years and they still, Scotland, 2 years, got it done. Sunflowers, okay. This is one of my wife's paintings. She told me to give a plug for her painting. She's into oil painting. She's getting pretty good at it.
Nice bananas.
What's that?
Nice bananas.
Okay. Now, the name sunflower actually is, there have been a lot of protests by the young people and that on social issues in Taiwan in the last couple of years. The name sunflower came up primarily with this issue, the Cross-Strait Service Trade Agreement, and the lack of transparency in it. And when they occupied the legislative yen, a kind of enterprising owner of a flower shop in Taiwan gave out rafts of sunflowers to everyone. And that's how the name sunflower is. It was like symbolic of unity with your cause, I'm giving everyone a sunflower. So they became the sunflower. But the groups involved had been working on many other issues, just housing and different things in Taiwan, and justice. They occupied the legislative yen from March 18th to April, almost a month, April 10th. Now what had happened earlier on this year, they were supposed to be back in September 2013, the cross-strait service thing was supposed to have 16 public hearings made, 8 held by the KMT and 8 held by the DPP. The KMT held their 8 in a week. Said, you know, everything done, everyone approves. People say, well, wait, no, I don't know. Okay, after you spoke, now everyone approves. And they ignored any contrasting. They basically rammed it through. The DPP refused to hold their 8 because they could see that no matter what was happening, it was going to be rammed through. There was a 90-day grace period then to get everything settled. The KMT said that the grace period was up, you know, on 3/21, and they insisted on a vote. And that's what put this here into, you know, perspective. 3 days before, they said, hey, they're going to ram it through again. Now, how many here know Akia? Akia he's a professor in Taiwan. He goes by the name of Akia. I think his last name is Tsai. Okay, yeah. Well, his group has always had a protest tent or booth outside the legislative inn, and people were gathering around there, and they started a ruckus. And it was in the evening, and a lot of there weren't that many guards, but the guards at the legislative inn kind of came over there to, you know, explore that. And that's what allowed the students of that to climb the fence and get into the legislative inn. So now once they got in there is another thing. You know, and they occupied it, and they had a couple hundred in there. And they set up a command center, information center, etc. And first they thought they could wait them out, and then they decided that we got to get them out. But good old Lying Joe had shot himself in the foot, because Wang Jingping is the Speaker of the Legislative Yuan. He's KMT, but both parties can work with him. He had not been pushing through the thing in September as fast as Mao wanted. People were saying, let's talk out. What is this trade going to affect us? What industries are going to be involved? And technically, the only person, so Ma tried to have Wang Jingping kicked out of the party. KMT. He was a legislator at large, which means if he's not in the party, he's not in the legislative yuan, and therefore he loses his speakership, he's out. Wang Jingping protested. He took it to court. He won. He won his case. So Ma basically tried political assassination on Wang Jingping. It didn't work. Now comes March. The only guy that can give the order to clear the decks of the legislative yuan is Wang Jingping. You think he's going to help Lying Joe? No way. So Wang would not give. Now, probably, technically, Ma could have overridden him, but he's already lost the court case. It's really going to seem like a dictator if he sends in the troops anyway. But if you remember, at a couple days afterwards, they also occupied for a short time the executive yuan. The executive yuan is under a totally different thing, not under Wang Jingping. It's under the premier. And the premier can say to the police, go in, get them out. They did. So that's why that one never lasted long. But this one, it did. In a way, the sunflowers, all these active groups, have become the watchdogs. They've toured the United States. Probably some of you have heard them. They support the Hong Kong movement. They've had some very active rallies recently in Taiwan. Actually, some people from Hong Kong had come when the sunflowers were in the legislative yuan and observed. And it was packed down there. You know, there were people inside the legislative yuan, but in the whole streets around, there were thousands of people. You'd have to walk the whole distance around the legislative yuan. Now, they can all be mobilized quickly. They're very high-tech. The problem that, in a way, they're going to have to face it, you know, some of them have tried to say, well, we're just for justice and, abstract things, but sooner or later, in a democracy, you've got to pick a political party. You can't say, I'm for justice, I'm for fairness. Okay, but you elect people to carry this out. So I remember back when the wild strawberries were, they had a big protest march, and they didn't want any groups to show their political flags. I think, Luby, you were there at the time. I was saying, this is not good strategy, because people share the protest, but they want to say their own identity. And it's better if you show this group from this side is for you, and this group from this side is for you. You've got a mass support. So this is going to come up in the next election, November 29th. Sooner or later in a democracy, you've got to take sides with one political party or the other, Like in the States, you're either Democrat or Republican. Well, you could be a third party also, but usually third parties are not that strong. Several groups have spun off of the sunflowers, and of course they are more attuned to high tech. Okay, now let's go back to China after Mao. What's going on there? Okay, I'm going to get to some points here and then go into questions with you. China is ruled by a capitalist oligarchy. Yeah, believe it or not, China is capitalistic, believe me. They're after the money. And it's an oligarchy. It's a one-party oligarchy. It's not really that much communist anymore. China has always had problems with the two different strains of thought, the Confucianist and the legalist thought. The Confucianist, thinks that everyone are good guys and everyone should obey the hierarchy. The legalist says you can't trust man, give him harsh laws. The legalists, in my mind, know how to manipulate the Confucianists. But here comes a point. China won the Olympic bid in 2001 and pulled it off. They had 7 years to pull off the Olympic Games. They did it. They spent about $43 billion US dollars. They built new stadiums. They tore down things. Did a great job. The Olympics were successful. They did that in 7 years. Now, the point I'm going to bring to you is that in 17 years, they still could not arrange a simple vote for Hong Kong to elect their own leaders. Remember, Scotland did it in 2 years, and that was a vote on independence. It wasn't the vote on who's the mayor. China is scared of democracy. They don't even want to give Hong Kong the right that they promised them in 20 years' time to elect their own leaders. So why? It's a one-party state with no free press. It is not transparent. Now, you all know transparency is a problem in any country, even in the US. We demand transparency of our leaders. We have a free press. You can argue, you can have Fox News, you can have whatever news you want. In China, control is the key paradigm, even religion. Recently the Pope was in Korea, I think, and he wanted to visit China or something, and China has a big problem with the Roman Catholic Church because the Pope is the one who appoints the bishops of the church. And China says, well, you can be Pope, but we appoint the bishops in China. Just like, the Buddhists and the Tibetans, the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama, when they die, then they are chosen from different people. China says, we want the right to choose who are the leaders in the Buddhists. Control, that's the key paradigm, no matter what. And this is something I'm going to mention here that many people in the U.S. State Department have not yet figured that out. I'm afraid. In the U.S. State Department, people were they're saying, well, I've been working with Chinese for a couple of years. I think we have a breakthrough. Hey, connect the dots, you know. 1911 was supposedly the revolution that threw off the Manchus. Actually, it was stillborn because Yuan Shikai and the Beiyang Army still maintained that they had to work a deal. It is over a century, and Taiwan or China is no closer to democracy now than it was. Why? Taiwan achieved democracy after the war, and here's one of my zingers, I believe, because there were more Taiwanese there than Waishenren. They outnumbered them, and eventually they could force the democracy. You know, they could force the Kaohsiung incident and all that. It took a lot of fighting, but they finally got martial law lifted, a two-party state accepted. But it was, if there were more Waishenren than Taiwanese, that wouldn't have happened, folks. It wouldn't have happened. So here's, you know, China does not have that situation. Now here's a point I'm going to make, and this may offend a few people. I don't know. It depends on how you feel about Sun Yat-sen. But, you know, Sun Yat-sen basically proposed government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's still over 100 years. You go to Taiwan, you see big pictures of Sun Yat-sen. You go to China, you see big pictures of Sun Yat-sen. In China, they've got his picture all over the place. It's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Why can't Hong Kong elect their own mayor? There's 100 years. It's kind of WTF. What's happening here? In my mind, I would like to see some good research done. I don't almost believe, you know, the three principles of the people were almost a ruse to throw out the Manchus. The Manchus had ruled China from about 1645 on. You know, over almost, what, 300 years? No, less than 300 years. But the predominantly Han Chinese didn't like the Manchus ruling them. They ruled, and it's interesting, they wanted to keep all the lands. So the Manchus had not only conquered China, they conquered Mongolia, they conquered Tibet, they conquered Xinjiang. You know, the Chinese wanted to get rid of the Manchus, but we want to keep Tibet, we want to keep Xinjiang, we want to keep Mongolia. The only reason Mongolia got free, not because of the USA, because of Russia. I wrote a paper on this, I'll send it to anyone that wants it, but Mongolia had a referendum after World War II. Russia backed it. Russia was stronger than China at the time. And Mao said, okay, we'll go with the result. About 95, 97% for the people said, we want independence. We don't want to be under those guys. These are the Mongolians talking. And the only reason they got it is because Russia backed them. Kind of an ironic twist in history. But why did Russia back them? They didn't necessarily like the Mongolians. They wanted a buffer state between them and China. They knew what was coming in China. In my mind, the United States should learn to deal with China the way Russia knows how to deal. Russia's been borders with them. They've had constant borders fights. We should catch on. And you get some people in the U.S. State Department say, well, I've been talking to the Chinese for 3 years. They say, look at history, friend. You're not going to get a breakthrough. They have a control mentality. Now there are conflicting paradigms that stifle progress in any democracy. And this is why, I'll write a paper on this one, why China, I don't have any real hope. Remember, Taiwan, you got it because there were more of you than the Waishen Ren, even though they had the guns and the power. They had the guns and the power, but you eventually got it. Okay, paradigmatic. Now this is a sneak preview on my next book. This is little, but I'm convinced that, they need a clear paradigm on the conflict between governments. Their paradigm conflicts exist, like, Islam has their paradigm of the world. The Christians have their paradigm of the world. The Jews have their paradigm. These are paradigms in constant conflict. The Middle East, constant paradigms in conflict about what is reality and what should be. A paradigm is a set of assumptions, concepts and values and practices that constitute a way of viewing reality. It is an example of a pattern or model. We live by paradigms whether we realize it or not. In my next book, I'm going to be asking the question, where do we want Earth and civilization to go? I'm kind of getting outside of all these petty conflicts between us. The story by Stephen Covey on this, I'll tell you, But the key paradigm that we need, in my mind, the global village, no more is a good paradigm. It shifted us from the 19th to the 20th century, Marshall McLuhan and that. We have to think in terms of a global home. I'm talking about the Earth now. I'm going beyond Taiwan. And we have to develop a need for tolerance. This is a sneak preview of my next book. Our paradigms are too small. We have to go beyond our global home. Here's us on planet Earth. This is our village out here. Going out there is the rest of the world, all the other galaxies. I'll go into that another time with people if they want. So what can you do for Taiwan? Summing up, support this mid-sized nation democracy in many ways. Let your congressman know. Learn Taiwan's historic struggle and defend it in social organizations in the U.S. Come from a standpoint of democracy. And beware of many misleading vocabulary and discourse. People like to say, well, U.S. has a one China policy. Most people don't understand what that means. That does not mean that Taiwan is a part of China. China thinks it does. That's China's one China policy, but Taiwan's one China policy is not that. You hear expressions like Greater China. I'll be someone talking, well, in Greater China have this, so I always say, well, I live in Greater Taiwan. You are from Greater China. Maybe Lesser China is Hong Kong. Maybe, But I live in Greater Taiwan, and maybe Lesser Taiwan is Penghu. Maybe, or Jinmen, or Matsu. But when people say, Greater China, there's a whole, the 1992 consensus. That's another bugbear. It was a two-party agreement between the KMT and the Communist Party. Nothing to do. Remember, legislators were just elected then. Okay, so we always in life have this dilemma. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I, being one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, and chose the other just as fair, but as for that, perhaps wanting where. And then it goes on, and that has made all the difference. Okay, questions? Amen.